Something took this plane and turned it over and turned it back over, and then we dropped and we shook back and forth. I mean, it was, I have quite a few miles on me, and it was, I can't describe this turbulence.
But it had always been one of these up and down, but never this wild gyration. If you look at pictures of jet streams, you know, drawings, you see like this, like a tube of air, and we must have flown, boom, right into the middle of it.
I felt like we were going to die, and there was no way out.
All of us who fly are used to a little bumpy air. That's why we're often surprised to learn just how much damage and injury turbulence can cause. Every year, at least one commercial jet is extensively damaged by turbulence. But the human toll is far greater. In non-fatal accidents, turbulence is the leading cause of injury to airline passengers and flight attendants.
And I remember just crawling and grabbing like this because I wanted to get to my jump seat. And the next thing I know, I was off the ground and I was reaching for the seat backs themselves. And then I was on top of this man and his 3-year-old son.
Unfortunately, an incident like this happens far too often. For example, one carrier reports an average of 9 turbulence events per month, resulting in 24 flight attendant injuries every month. We have every reason to believe these numbers are typical, so it's easy to see that we have a serious problem. This video will take a closer look at how we can effectively reduce turbulence-related injuries and damage.
It took me several months to get over this incident because I saw the injuries that occurred.
It was almost like a nightmare. Actually, it was a nightmare. It's my nightmare.
The only thing that was keeping me in my seat was my seat belt. I was literally being pushed against the seat belt up and down. People were screaming.
I thought that was it. The plane was going down. I flew to the ceiling, hit the floor, slammed to the ceiling and the floor over and over. I don't know how many times.
It was like she was just a rag doll flying around that cabin. It's an intense force that will kill someone if they're in the wrong place.
While we may encounter turbulence in any part of the atmosphere, there are some areas where it's most likely to occur. These areas include over hills and mountains, in and near clouds, or in the vicinity of thunderstorms.
But what stands out the most in my mind that day would have to be the intensity of the turbulence. And I believe it's even more pronounced in the tail of the airplane because of the center of gravity and the fact that the tail is whipping around quite a bit more than what we experience up in the cockpit.
So pilots should be aware that while they may be experiencing smooth sailing, conditions in the cabin might be pretty rough.
When the turbulence started and I rose to the ceiling, I just remembered hitting it so harshly and falling down, like it was somebody just threw me down on cement sidewalk. That the visible thing was my ankle, but I also got bruised all over the place, plus the fact that I was getting burned from the coffee, spilling all over me.
Complacency is another major factor in turbulence-related injuries. Crew members become complacent simply because turbulence is so common and because many encounters seem insignificant. But as the following real-life incident shows, a flight crew that's complacent about entering areas of turbulence can endanger everyone on board.
When cruising between layers, we noticed some activity on the radar along our route of flight. I thought about making a PA and turning the seatbelt sign back on. I also thought about asking ATC for a deviation, but what we saw on the radar didn't appear like very much, so I felt there was no hurry. 10 to 15 miles before reaching the displayed weather, we encountered severe turbulence. It was a very rough ride, and the aircraft lost about 500 feet of altitude. The flight attendant was not seated and ended up on the floor.
Complacency can also affect passengers because they simply don't know how much damage turbulence can cause. Besides, they see flight attendants moving around while the seatbelt sign is on, so don't see the harm in doing the same thing. And we also encounter culture and language differences. Some people may not understand the seatbelt message or may be used to ignoring it in their own countries. So it's crucial to make sure that all passengers understand the importance of wearing their seatbelts and do so. Communication between the cabin and cockpit also plays a vital role in the outcome of turbulence encounters. The cockpit crew must inform the cabin crew of impending turbulence, just as the cabin crew must inform the pilots of conditions in the cabin. And the cabin crew should understand that they may have to secure the cabin or seat themselves without orders from the cockpit. Even when it's not possible to avoid turbulence, there are still many things crew members can do to minimize injury. Pilots should brief flight attendants at the earliest possible time. The briefing should include the estimated time until reaching the area, the estimated intensity and duration of the turbulence, necessary actions before and after entering turbulent conditions, and the details of the PA announcement. If the decision is made to secure the cabin, make sure flight attendants have enough time to do so. Flight attendants can also do a great deal to reduce turbulence-related injuries by keeping the cabin at minimum readiness levels at all times. This begins by letting the passengers know that it's important to obey the seatbelt sign. Periodically check to see that every passenger has his or her seatbelt fastened, and not just when the seatbelt sign is on. Many passengers, especially children, aren't aware of the potential for injury during turbulence, so they simply ignore the seatbelt sign and the PA announcements. Also check overhead bins to ensure that they're properly latched. Be aware of any loose items, from people to soda cans, that could become missiles, and stow service items and carts when not in use. Locate the nearest empty seat in case you have to quickly use it, and keep in mind that the nearest seating area might be the floor. Readiness is one of the best defenses against turbulence-related injuries, but once the turbulence has started, crew members can still help minimize its impact. When turbulence is light, the captain can turn on the seatbelt sign at his or her discretion. But for anything more than light turbulence, the seatbelt sign must be on. The captain should then make an announcement instructing flight attendants and passengers to be seated. An interphone call to the flight attendants should follow, briefing them on the expected intensity and duration of the turbulence. During light turbulence, flight attendants must make sure that seat belts are fastened and that all infants and children are secured. Check to see that lavatories and bassinets are unoccupied. Secure unattended carts and make sure that loose items are stowed. When walking becomes difficult, flight attendants should sit down and fasten their seat belts. Do not jeopardize your safety by moving around the cabin during periods of severe turbulence. In fact, if the flight becomes bumpy, don't wait for the captain to turn on the seatbelt sign. Go ahead and make a cautionary PA. Then ask the captain to turn the seatbelt sign on.
When I return, if it starts shaking a bit in the back, I will be very comfortable picking up that phone and telling the pilot, hey, we need to be seated back here. This is really getting rough on us.
I think there's a misconception that flight attendants feel that they have to take their jump seat. If it's bad, grab a seat, any seat. Strap yourself in.
When the cockpit crew advises that it's safe to resume cabin duties, flight attendants may get up and start returning the cabin to normal. Turn the cabin lights to bright. Calm the passengers and check to make sure that no one is hurt. Let the captain know if there are any injuries or damage. If the seatbelt sign continues to remain on after the turbulence has passed, check with the captain to see if it's still safe to conduct duties. After any turbulence encounter, pilots are required to report the event as soon as possible. Pilot reports often provide the best available information for turbulence encounters and may be the only information about CAT encounters. As we've seen, a little bumpy air has the potential to cause serious damage to aircraft and debilitating injury to passengers and crew members. Just because turbulence seems to go with the territory doesn't mean we can take it for granted. Avoid turbulence whenever possible, and if you must fly into it, take the necessary steps to reduce its impact. Your fellow crew members and passengers are depending on you. Thanks for watching.